and publish it on our channel on YouTube, so anybody can look back and prove to be pretty useful. So, first of all, welcome again, and thank you for joining over the first time. Welcome, my name is Alex. Anatoly is my partner here. We're PRIZ Guru. We're starting to call it as an ultimate hub for continuous problem solving and innovation. And we're conducting these webinars to tackle different areas in the platform, different concepts. And today we're talking about the 9 windows thinking. Now, as usual, we start with a quote, in this case from Abraham Lincoln. And he said the most reliable way to predict the future is to create it. So that's one of the outcomes from 9 windows thinking, is actually try to predict the future. So let's dive into that. First of all, at a very high level, what is nine windows thinking? 9 windows thinking in general, it's also called, by the way, system operator, also known as system operator. It's an analytical tool that coming from Tree's world, and it's a tool that allows us to it helps us to think about the system in space and time. Now, one of the things that or several things that the tool helps us to do is, of course, like any other tool in the platform that we have in the platform, it helps us to learn how the system operates. Even simple tool like 9 windows, it still helps us to think about how the system operates overall and how it evolves. Right. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about: how it evolves, how it used to evolve, and where is it going further. And this is where potential prediction of the system development going forward. Of course, using the platform, it allows us to document our line of thought and how we analyze how the system changed over time, over time in space and time, of course. And of course, at the end of the day, we're all trying to make a strategic decision in the company as an innovator. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. So let's try to go with a very, very simple example, just to emphasize, just to understand how the mechanics work. So if we look at the house, and on purpose, we took a house somewhere from the past, so we know what to expect. If we look at the house as one big system, it's really hard to analyze where it was, how the system works, where is it going. Apologize. Where is it going, and so on. It's really, really hard to analyze. So if we look at this brick house as a whole, it's not very helpful, right? Now, let's try to break it apart and basically start breaking into a subcomponent. And these, if we're calling a house as a system, the whole system that we're looking at, things like brick could be a subsystem. So it's something that it's one of the components that the house is built off of, right? So that kind of makes sense. So what can you think about as a super system? The super system is what the house is building, right? That's the components. Houses are components of, in this case, it's going to be a town, right? So brick houses is somewhat fairly a small town, and that's what they're building. Now, this is the space axis, right? Where we can say, here's my system, here's the components of the system, and that system potentially builds a super system, and so on. Fairly easy to use. Now, what about the time? So we're talking about the space and time. So what about the time? And the time, of course, the axis of the time, it's on the right. Currently it's a present. On the left, it's a past, and we will talk about the future in a moment. Now, we know that somewhere in the past we had wooden houses, right? So what would be a subsystem of a wooden houses if we compared bricks in here? If we talked about bricks in here, it's probably timber, right? So it's basically wooden pieces that people used to build houses from. And it's a smaller town, let's call it a village right now, as a super system, right? So you see how we went from the known present to the known past. So again, we're in a fairly well-known situation because again, we're talking about the past. But what about the future? All right, let's try to think about the future. And again, we're talking about an example, a very well-known example, where very well-known data as of right now. So we had timber, we have bricks, and potentially we can talk about the concrete blocks, right? Many houses today, many buildings today, they built out of ready-to-go concrete blocks, right? Of course, it leads to concrete buildings, and then it's an even bigger cities. Okay, and conceptually, this is how the 9 windows is organized. Now, to summarize it all, when we're talking about the 9 windows thinking, this is like one slide description of the rules, how we use the nine windows thinking. While there's no specific rules necessarily, but there is a convention, right? And convention, again, it's a 3x3 matrix where the current system that we're trying to analyze and to take it further is in the middle. And this is what we're usually filling in first. And this is what the numbers are. The numbers are the suggested order how we're supposed to fill up this matrix, right? So we're going from present system, then a present subsystem, present supersystem, and then filling up the same thing for the past. And then the order here a little bit changes for the future, right? Since we're interested in seeing how our system works or how our system is going to be progressed in the future, then we need to think about the subsystem and the supersystem, and then eventually try to think about the future of the system. Now, I want to remind a couple of things that we talked about in the past as well. One is the fact that every engineering system is progressing by the objective laws, and what that means really, you don't, nobody has a choice of how the system is going to develop. You just need to find how is it going to be developed. The other piece is the fact that in every system, if you have components, usually people working on the component that least developed, right? The least developed, the least painful. So we can think about these things in the same manner. We have the subsystems. If we're working about on the system, we're trying to improve the system. By definition, that system is the least developed, right? Because we're trying to improve it. We're trying to think about where to take it further. Usually the components of the system, what the system is built out of, the subsystems, they already developed further, right? As well as the super systems. They not necessarily develop, but there is a demand. So if you're thinking back of the city and the concrete, you can think of it like, there is a demand for a bigger city. The concrete blocks will already know how to build it potentially, or we know what needed. Then we can predict what the house is going to look like. Now let's take it by example. And at this point, we will do about 3 very detailed examples that we used in the past in our case studies and in some real world example. So let's analyze a digital image. And that would be our system. Okay. So a digital image, something that you well know, any image that you take in on a phone and digital camera, it doesn't matter how you take it, a digital image, right? So what's the subsystem of a digital image? It's the image that's stored as digits, as numbers, right? And you can think about it as a virtual particles on a physical storage. So it's a information on a physical device. Now, what's the super system? If you think about where we're storing, how we're presenting these images, and here we do want to put the presentation piece, and that's why PowerPoints and some sort of presentations, potentially movies, potentially digital albums, whatever it is, how we look at these images, right? So in the past, of course, we know the physical regular image that we used to print, right? What can you think about the subsystems in this case? Of course, it's the physical storage on a piece of paper. So it's the physical particles on a piece of paper, right? And then how did we present that on a physical photo album? You know, the book, the old nice book that we all want to hold in our hands. Now, if we think about the progression of the subsystems, first of all, we have the physical particles on the physical storage. Then we have virtual particles on the physical storage. Naturally, the next going to be virtual particles on a virtual storage, right? Same with photo album, which was a physical storage and physical images on the physical storage. Then we have the virtual images on the physical storage. And of course, the virtual album, some sort of virtual album on the virtual storage, whatever the hell that means. So what can you think about can be the next generation of digital imaging? What we thought about, again, there is no right or wrong answer, but we thought about the case, again, virtual image on a virtual storage, right? What that potentially could mean is instead of having some device that you need to look at the image, you can just have your image in your mind, right? Many different interpretations. Again, we use it as an example, but you know, you don't need any physical device to see the image, right? What sees the image is the brain. Let's take another example, the cell phone, right? So today's cell phones, as we all know, the cell phone, the device that we holding in our hands, is you can think about it as a cell phone comes to the person, or it is always with the person that carries it, right? So what's the cellular phone's subsystem? What's the component of the like the main components of that cellular phone usage, right? So it's a person and the phone that makes them both useful. The super system, of course, it's what allows that to work, and that's network of antennas, that's the servers, that's the processors, the software routers. There's a lot of things that's involved in that, right? In the past, though, we had the regular wired phone at home or in the street, the phone booth, right? So basically, when we needed the phone, we needed to go to where the phone is. We didn't have any other choice. And of course, this subsystem, if you think about it, yes, we had the person, we had the phone, but we also had a bunch of physical things like wires, like cables outside of homes, and so on and so forth. So there is some physical connection out of that. And what was the super system? It's the same network, but again, physically connected. It was wires and phone station. And if you remember, people working on this phone station and connecting physically specific phones to a different line and so on. Now, the future of the super system, if you look at this as a person, phone, wires, then wires are gone. What would be the next thing that will be gone? Probably the physical phone itself, right? We don't want to remove ourselves. So what about the super systems? We had a physical network of wires and phone stations and so on. Then we had the network of antennas and servers and whatever comes with it, the software. What can be the next? The network of people. We're basically simplifying the system from a human perspective. In reality, nobody needs to know about the existence of antennas and servers and everything else. We just care to talk to each other, right? So it's a network of people. So what can be next for the phone, or phone in quote?
Telepathy.
Potentially, the person becomes the phone. Again, whatever that means. How we implement it, how do we get there? That's a completely separate discussion, right? You know, a lot of sci-fi movies out there, the phone was like embedded in the hand or something like that. Many things can be potentially thought about as a creative accomplishment of talking to each other. And I'm not talking about the fact that, today's phone is not really a phone anymore, but here we're actually trying to talk about the phone, the communication device. Right?
Alex, may I add a few words?
Of course.
Yeah. Guys, for instance, we're sitting in the same room and I'm saying something. You can hear it. If we're sitting in different rooms, you cannot hear it. I can use cell phone. What cell phone does, he converts mechanical vibration that I generate while I'm talking, converts it into electromagnetic signal, electromagnetic vibration. This vibration is accepted by antenna, treated by server, and sent back to the cell phone of another person. And after that, converted again into mechanical vibration. Why? Why server, why antenna cannot accept mechanical vibration and send this mechanical vibration directly to the certain person? This is what I see in this analysis. Because I would say we're too stupid in order to be able, in order not to be able to accept electric or electromagnetic fields. Everything we're doing, we convert into electricity. Atomic energy, we convert into electricity, solar into electricity. We don't know how to use it directly. We're not developed enough. The same here, we're talking and convert it into electric signal. Why? So this is my vision.
By the way, there is if somebody watched ever, it's called, I believe, Star Trek, right? So it was way before the cell phones even existed, but they already had this communication of, a little button on their chest saying, they press the button, they can talk, and whoever needs to hear them hears them. Remember that? So that's basically potential one of the options of having a person together with the phone. with them. All right, let's go next, and a more closer to real world example, right? And something that is currently trying to be developed. So there's plasma in microchip manufacturing. And plasma is used in many different places in that industry. It could be for spattering, it could be for depositions, it could be for etching. Plasma device as a process, it's used all over the place, almost in any process in microelectronics manufacturing, right? So let's try to analyze that and think about what's the next for the plasma, or for the process that plasma is kind of trying to achieve, right? So again, plasma as a process in microelectronics, not necessarily the actual device, but as a process. So the present, we try to think about the plasma as our system. That's why we're putting it in the middle. The subsystem of a plasma is radicals, ions. The supersystem is the plasma flow, right? Now let's go to the past. What was in the past? Instead of plasma, we had hot gases. So we were heating the gases to achieve some chemical reaction or faster chemical reaction. The subsystem of that, of course, it's the molecules that moving faster to achieve these hot gases. And how achieved it? What was it in? It was pretty much in the oven, right? Now, what's next? If we think about this subsystem, so we have the molecules, we have radicals and ions. The next natural progression, if you think about, it's only electrons in here. What can we think about the supersystem? Oops. So we need to involve a little bit of creative thinking and understand what does it mean oven versus plasma flow. So in the oven, it is basically a three-dimensional treatment. We don't have any control over how the heat is spreading or directed. It's not even directed, it's just the entire space of that oven is heated, right? How does plasma work though? Right? It is two-dimensional now. We're actually heating a surface, not necessarily the entire space. And again, what can you think about the next step? Of course, it's a one-dimensional. And in this case, we can think about an electron jet, right? Electron beam, right? It could be electron beam, it could be ion beam, which by the way exists already. But let's say it's an electron beam for one-dimensional treatment, right? We just heating one particular point on a specific surface. So now let's go back to the system. We have hot gases in the past. We have the plasma today. What's going to be in the next generation of plasma? It's simply electron beam, right? So instead of having potentially in microelectronics, if you know that we have masks, and then the mask is there to be to shield certain areas because we have the full two-dimensional treatment of the entire surface. Now we potentially don't need masks, and we can draw the pattern with the electron beam. Okay. I'll pause here for a moment if people have any questions about the concept. And Anatol, if you want to add something.
Guys, do you remember previous TV sets with electron beam that knows how to create picture? I think the future of microelectronics is the same. Mask will be in the computer, and electron beam will will draw a picture, which is in the computer, transistors and connectors and so on, so on.
And by the way, yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Alex Levin. Yeah, I think it's interesting observation here. Anatoly actually mentioned a couple of times. So these 9 windows may really lead to direction where the best future is the past. So, you know, no, this is what you're talking about, Anatoly. You're talking
Exactly.
about, for example, before when we had a phone, we did not convert to signals, right? We did it differently. Now, going forward, we don't want to convert to signals, right? We go to the past. So the past is the best future. And actually, you know, looking in general at a bigger picture, right? So what we are doing right now, we try to produce more and more electricity. We say, okay, electricity is an answer to everything. You know, we have electric cars, we have, you know, electric heating, we have everything now electric. But if you think about that, the real problem, not to use more electricity, but use less electricity. We need to go into the past and see how we can live without electricity. So this is a real solution to many of our problems. So I think 9 windows is really interesting tool that may really guide you to the past and think about the past. You know, just a comment.
And yeah, and if you think about it, if you think about the ideal system as well, right? And it goes back to what you just mentioned. We do need electricity because we don't know how else to live without it. But we do need to use less so we actually can live without it eventually, right? So we need to have the function without the system.
Yes, this is a really strong solution for the future, right? I mean, what can be stronger? Not to use electricity.
Yeah, true. And also it goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning, that usually in this type of matrix, we usually have one thing already solved, and that's what Anatoly mentioned in the old TV sets, where we had the tube, electron jet, and the jets, and you know, being in existence for a long time already, right? We know electrons probably existed for not probably, they existed forever, right? So it's there, nothing new here. It's just how we use it. We use something existing in a different way, right? What is going to be next? I don't know. But all I'm saying, these things, the super system and the subsystem, they usually exist in some form of shape. So we can predict how the system using these super systems and subsystems. I'm trying to look at these usually as subsystem is the building blocks, where the super system is more of a demand in many cases, right? Same with the city and the house. City is the demand, the bricks are the building blocks. What can we build from the building blocks to accommodate the demand, right? It can be looked at this way. Cool. Any other comments before we jump into the platform? Okay, so I will, first of all, there is much more information about the 9 windows on our website as well. And one of the places that you can find the 9 windows thinking is in our blogs. In our blogs, we have pretty nice examples and case studies. By the way, here's both of the plasma and the cell phone, and the explanation about the 9 windows thinking. We also have the explanation of 9 windows thinking under our tools in here. And when we go into the platform, And let's jump for a second into here. One of the creative thinking tools, of course, we have the nine windows, right? Now, when you start at the 9 windows, basically there's no magic in here. All we have is that matrix organized and numbered in the suggested order how we need to fill them. But I'll jump into the example that we already prepared. And in this case, we were trying to analyze why people in an organization need to use us, right? So where is it even coming from? And in this particular case, the system that we analyzed is the person that currently, in many cases, performs the physical and the managerial functions as an engineer, right? What it needs what that person needs as a subsystem is the basic knowledge plus the management. And basic knowledge, it means the engineering basic knowledge and the managerial knowledge. And of course, the environment for the person, system survival, whether it's a company, whether it's some sort of organization, startup, it doesn't matter. In the past, the engineer was dealing with just the engineering tasks, right? And of course, he needed just the engineering knowledge. He didn't need to deal with managerials. And same environment for person survival. I want to comment on that, Natalie.
Yeah, this is what I see, that our today's engineers lose basic knowledge. And actually everything is moving into management. And you don't, pour solution into another solution, you're into another vessel. You just push button. But you should understand what's happened when you push button and what could happen and what problem could happen here. And you need a platform as a facilitator of your thinking, as a facilitator for your managing of your problem solving.
Right. Now, of course, all of that can be done on a piece of paper or on a whiteboard, wherever we choose to do it. The system allows us to document the entire thought process as well, right? So it's not a piece of paper that eventually getting thrown away. The system documents everything, and then eventually all of these things they end up in a report, including all the tools. So for example, this is the 9 windows thinking inside the report. And of course, when we thinking of when we working on a 9 windows tool, even then we still generate the ideas like any other tool. Anything that we think about, a process of thinking will push us to think about new ideas, and of course ideas getting generated. And this whole thought process is part of the same documentation. Another example, and it's actually a real.
Oh, just a moment, Alex. Sergio wants to tell something.
Apologies.
Yes, please. Yes, Sergio.
No, just thinking the practical and standardized knowledge can be is extinguishing, and the rest, the less defined knowledge, that the knowledge that is more an art, like managerial, will survive. That's sad, but okay.
But true. So here's the thing. My personal hope is that people will embrace engineering thinking a little bit more than just trying to become managers. Everybody today trying to become a manager, right? not many engineers left, like true engineers that want to be engineers and want to stay engineers. All right,
Okay.
I want to jump into a little bit different example, something that we worked on with one of the startups, and I'll enable this project, reactivate this project just for the sake of being a little bit more visible. This is an example where a startup, what they were trying to be a startup at that point. They were trying to find to create a product and sell it to their potential customer. But their potential customer that they actually built the system for at the very, very beginning, they weren't even buying anything, right? So we started analyzing what's going on. Now, actually, the system, we decided to use the system as their customer. So the customer, their name is Trulio. They actually dealing with KYC, KYB systems. It's know your client, know your business. What these guys do, they identify fraudulent transactions, whether it's credit card fraudulent transactions, banking transactions. They trying to understand if, a person that says he is Bob, he is actually Bob and not somebody else, right? This is their business. Now, the guy who was trying to work on a startup, he was trying to become a broker of the data. Of course, these guys, they're using a huge amount of data to make those decisions. And he was trying to become a broker for data sources for this company. And the idea was great on a paper, just they weren't buying, simply weren't buying, right? And we started to analyze them. So today there is a brokers, there's some sort of brokers, they more of a physical kind of semi-manual approach. There's a robots that collect the data and they collect it into some sort of files, either it's CSV or something else, and they submit it manually to these companies, these type of companies. They just leading in space. And then, of course, the super system that was the product that they building is the fraud identification and compliance, and there's a little bit more details in here. It's data and automation driven, integration driven. So there's a lot of moving pieces in there that makes it happen. So in the past, people were basically doing it manually. That's why when you were requesting for a credit card, it was taking like a week until you're getting approved, right? Not immediate. In the past, people were basically collecting that data manually, or everything was manual. And the system overall was driven by people, right? Now, what happens in the subsystem where they were trying to automate this piece. Everything is collected, everything is provided by the APIs to the platforms that want to use it. Everything is automatic. All the data can be submitted to them in automatic fashion. So that was their business model that we were trying to create. The problem is that the whole world was moving from identifying, and it's still moving to that direction. It was moving from identifying with the current data into more of a machine learning approach or AI approach, right? So basically replace the human intervention completely. And what does that really mean? These companies like Trulio, they were building these systems themselves. And what that means, they didn't need the data brokers at all. They actually were starting to build in the brokerage capabilities within their system. So if you think about it, in the future, this is not going to be a client, potential client at all for any brokers. And in fact, like a couple of months later, they started to disconnect to even from their existing brokerage, like these half manual brokerages. So that's one of the examples where people did spend a lot of time building the product. They actually did build the product. Nobody wanted to buy it. Why? Because their plan was completely different. They didn't even understand, like these guys, they didn't even understand the future of the client they're trying to build a system for. Eventually that whole idea was dropped completely, and they pivoted to a different space.
By the way, it was very excited session. They spent about 2 hours, as far as I know. Yeah.
In a couple of hours.
Yeah, and they were really shocked. They have no future for their product. And by the way, they changed their strategy and they got investment.
Well, they went to a completely different product. Using the same technology, they pivoted to a different market altogether. And recently they raised capital. The most shocking part for them was that they spent so much time on their product and they believed in that so much. They spent like half a year or even more for the product, for just a minimal viable product. And all of a sudden, within 2 hours, there was some understanding or realization that nobody needs it, which is actually a good result.
Right.
Sad, but good result. I'll pause here for a moment. Again, there's a lot of information on the website. By the way, something to look at is like every tool, we have a fairly extensive documentation description of how to use the 9 windows and in the concepts of them. So a lot of information on the website. And I'll open the session for questions.
There are plans to develop this tool in order to include also the anti-system, the competitive system, the evolution in PRIZ of the 9 windows into the 27 windows, into a multi-faced.
Yeah, we were asked that question a couple of times. Maybe we didn't see we didn't see a couple of things. We didn't see the demand enough for that. Besides that, people, even, how do I say it, even people who know exactly what they're doing, exactly on how to work with 9 windows, they using the more dimensions very, very, very rarely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to go to another dimension, it's always possible to create additional instance of that tool and continue further, right? And analyze this piece as a system and take it further, or that piece as a system and take it further in a space dimension. So there's no limits to that. So purely we didn't see the demand for it.
Okay.
By the way, I use it very frequently, and it's very hard work to complete 9 windows as necessary. It's not easy, but it's very, very productive. It's very effective. Try this.
Now many times people perceive it as something that's supposed to be easy, you know, back to the today's engineering capabilities of especially young population. People expect to push a button, get a result, and continue with their lives, right? It doesn't work this way, unfortunately. Or people expecting some artificial intelligence that will guide them and tell them what to do and just give them the result. Doesn't work this way. Right? None of these creative thinking tools work this way. They built to help the engineer, not to replace the engineer.
Yeah. By the way, Windows is very good for clever documentation of, let's say, excursion or some deviation that happened on production line. Something happened at certain operation. This is a system. This is a tool, and you can describe a super system and subsystem. And past is something that happened at the previous operation. And the future is the next operation. And you can link together what's happened at the operation that happened, excursion, and you can answer, will it impact the next operation, and so on. This is a very, very good way to document event. Of course, you can write email very long and write down what comes to your head, to your brain. But here, everything is very ordered and good for remembering and good for, you know, answering questions of managers and for remembering and for analysis. And this is very good to keep data of excursion, and from this move to another tools, to another creative thinking tools.
Now that you're mentioning excursions, I was reading a couple of articles about how people use 9 windows as an additional way for root cause analysis, right? And again, it's kind of the same, but it felt like more not root cause analysis, but root cause description, right? So this is what happened. What happened before? Well, this fall apart. What happened before this fall apart? And what does it cause on a macro level? And what did it cause on micro level? And so on. So it's an interesting ways how people use the tools, and in a different
Directions.
Yeah, different approaches, different directions, different uses, right? I never thought about this for a root cause description, but again, came across the article that people made it useful in that space.
Yep.
All right, we have another 9 minutes, but if there's no other questions, I want to say thank you everyone again, and Happy New Year soon.
Yeah.
Great. Happy holidays, guys.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
And I'll stop recording.